The biggest fight card of all time, UFC 300, April 13th, 2024. It is finally here. It is time for this monumental, historic event for us all to bear witness to. For YouTube's sake, I'm going to do three separate videos on the channel. I'm going to do one video discussing the three championship fights. That is what you are here and seeing right now. The second video will be the latter two fights on the main card: Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, Bo Nickel, Cody Brundage, and then the four regular prelim fights. And then the third video will be the early prelim four fights, which literally kicks off with two former champions, Davison Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt. So that's going to be the three video breakdown on YouTube this week. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is what I'm anticipating the schedule to be like, and then plenty of short content as well for UFC 300 and for PFL going down Friday night. But let's get into it. Let's not wait any longer. UFC 300, Alex Pereira defends his light heavyweight championship against Jamahal Hill, coming to regain the belt that he never lost. The co-main event, Zhang Weili looks to defend her title for the second time against Yan Xiaonan, the number one ranked strawweight contender. In the third title fight, Justin Gaethje will actually defend, technically, the BMF title against Max Holloway at 155 pounds. We'll start at 205 pounds. Pereira versus Hill, the headlining spot of UFC 300. The light heavyweight champion of the world, Alex Pereira, was granted a middleweight title shot in the UFC after just 3 victories and 7 total fights in his entire professional mixed martial arts career. Not only did he knock out and shock the world by beating Israel Adesanya that night in November of 2022 in Madison Square Garden, but he would then go on to, yes, lose that middleweight title, but jump up to 205 pounds, beat Jan Blachowicz, earn a shot at the light heavyweight title, and then defeat Jiří Procházka in November of last year in that very same arena, Madison Square Garden. So with 11 total professional mixed martial arts fights, Alex Pereira has beaten 4 former champions and become a 2-weight UFC world champion. And Saturday night, he will headline the biggest fight card in UFC history by welcoming back the former light heavyweight champion, Jamahal Hill, the first ever Dana White Contender Series alum to win a UFC championship. Coming back after more than a year off from a torn Achilles, he looks to get his title back around his waist. It's no secret that what Alex Pereira has done has been nothing short of incredible, unbelievable, unprecedented, never done before. The list goes on in terms of words that you would want to describe Poatan's career with. Wins over Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Jan Blachowicz, Jiří Procházka at 36 years old after years and years and years on the kickboxing side of mixed martial arts, becoming a 2-weight world champion in his own right in that regard, in that sport, by knocking out Israel Adesanya and beating Israel Adesanya in that sport. It is one of the most incredible, rare careers I feel like we have ever seen in the sport of mixed martial arts, and especially in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Now, after his 5-fight UFC middleweight career and moving up to 205 pounds, it didn't start out with just some star-making performance or crazy knockout like he had done in his UFC debut with a flying knee. He instead, Alex Pereira, squeaked by in a split decision against former champion Jan Blachowicz in a very close fight, very closely contested fight, where Pereira had to show that he can go the full 15 minutes in order to pull out a victory, in which he had only had to do one prior time when he beat Bruno Silva back in 2022. But regardless of it being a close fight, he got the victory and proceeded into a title opportunity with Jamahal Hill on the sidelines recovering from his injury. It was Alex Pereira moving up to win a second world title against Yuri Prohaska, who had just returned as well from an injury similar to what Jamahal Hill will be doing this coming weekend. Similar to Alex Pereira, but in even quicker fashion, Yuri Prohaska in his own right earned a title shot in the UFC after just 2 victories. He debuted in 2020 by knocking out Volkan Oezdemir, a former title challenger. He then would go on to knock out Dominic Reyes in 2021, and in 2022, he would fight Glover Teixeira in one of the craziest fights of all time, the fight of the year for the UFC in 2022, and he submitted Glover Teixeira with 28 seconds left in the fight to become the light heavyweight, champion of the world. That reign was short-lived as Yuri would go on to injure his shoulder very badly. He would be sidelined from June 12th, 2022 up until November of 2023. And that night, Alex Pereira made history by becoming a two-weight world champion, middleweight, light heavyweight, the first ever of double champion in those 2 weight classes, and he did it by knocking out Yuri Prohaska 4 minutes and 8 seconds into the second round. And now Jamahal Hill will look to do what Yuri Prohaska could not do, to return from a devastating injury, beat Alex Pereira, and be the light heavyweight champion of the world. Again, it was a belt that Yuri never lost. It was a belt that he vacated upon injury, and Jamahal Hill never lost his light heavyweight title after he beat Glover Teixeira in January of 2023. Jamahal would actually tear his Achilles in a basketball game, a pickup game against other UFC fighters in July of last year. I think it was International Fight Week of 2023. Now he is back in April of 2024. So it has been 14 months out of action for Jamahal Hill, just shy of 15 months as a matter of fact. And what Alex Pereira has done with his career is incredible, but Jamahal Hill is just as good. He's amassed a win of 6 wins and 1 loss in the UFC. The only loss to Paul Craig in a fight where Jamahal Hill's arm was playing spaghetti noodle. It was flapping all over the place. Looks like he dislocated his elbow. Wild fight. That entire card, UFC 263, was just wild in its own right. But ever since that loss in the summer of 2021, Jamahal Hill has tallied off 4 straight victories, 3 of them by devastating knockout, and the 4th and final to become the champion was in a masterclass performance over Glover Teixeira. And as I had said in the intro, he was the first Dana White Contender Series alum to become a UFC world champion. The promotion is behind him for that very reason. They want as many people as possible from that show to be highly regarded in the sport, to be champions. Jamahal Hill led the charge, followed by Sugar Sean O'Malley, and he is still the current bantamweight champion of the world. I love everything about the X's and O's of this fight as well. The storylines are incredible. Jamahal looking to come back from an injury that we don't see very often in this sport of mixed martial arts. A ruptured Achilles is something that is very rare in this fight game. So he's looking to come back from an injury, regain the title that he never lost, and continue on in his prime years at the ripe age of just 32 years old. Alex Pereira looks to continue building and cementing a legacy in such little time that is truthfully going to become unmatched if he continues to win. He's 36 years old and doing remarkable things, and if he can continue to get victories, his resume will be etched in stone. But as I said, the X's and O's are interesting. You look at this, the metrics are identical. Both guys 6'4", both guys with 79-inch reach. Both guys love to stand and strike and bang on the feet. Both are known for devastating knockouts, and they both have done it against high-level competition. Pereira has knocked out the likes of Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Yuri Prohaska. Jamahal Hill has knocked out Jimmy Crute, Thiago Santos, which at the time was the first guy to do that in nearly 4 years to Santos. He's knocked out Johnny Walker in one of the most insane looking knockouts that you'll ever see in this fight game. These guys have fight-ending power at any moment in a fight. And the community seems to be split on this. Pereira, as of right now, I'm recording this on Tuesday, so it's a little bit earlier in the week than normal. He's a minus 130 favorite to retain his championship. Jamahal Hill on the comeback as the slight underdog, plus 110. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if I'll be touching this fight on the side of picking a winner. Now, will this fight go 25 minutes? I would be astonished if it did. Jamahal Hill, for what it's worth, win going the distance is 5-0, but Alex Pereira is 2-0. So while it is possible, I see both guys looking to come out here and make a statement. And it may not happen in the first round. It may not happen in the second round, but as this fight goes on, two high-level strikers like this will be able to pinpoint the weaknesses and the holes in each other's games. Someone will capitalize, and someone will leave the light heavyweight champion of the world with a knockout victory. So give me your predictions for the UFC 300 main event in the comments below. I love this fight. I'm glad that they got this spot. People that are complaining about UFC 300 are just, it's insane. It's petty. I know that Dana hyped it up that we were going to get, GSP, Khabib, Conor McGregor. That's what it felt like in terms of the hype. But let's be realistic here, guys. We know that that wasn't going to happen. And so if you just take those expectations away and just be a fan of the sport, this card is unbelievable. And these two guys at the forefront in that headlining spot, Alex Pereira in literally 5 years has become, actually, what am I saying, 5 years? In less than 3 total years, has become one of the most recognizable names, not only in the UFC, but in the entire sport of mixed martial arts. This guy is at every single event, taking pictures with all the fans. He's put on every broadcast sitting front row. And Jamahal Hill may not be as fan loved. He's a little bit more hate. He goes at people on Twitter, but he's at every single event. He's getting shown on every broadcast. He has an MMA podcast that is here very highly regarded and is great in terms of the production level of that show. These guys deserve this opportunity. Yeah, they may not be Conor McGregor. They may not be John Jones, George St. Pierre, but they are the two best light heavyweights in the world. It is a division that has the longest amount of history and fandom behind it. In my opinion, in UFC's history, the 205-pound division, and it feels right that that division gets the headlining spot of the biggest card in the company's history. So that's it for the main event, but now we go to the co-main event. The strawweight championship of the world gets defended. Zhang Weili looks to continue her reign of terror, and Yan Xiaonan looks to make history and become UFC champion. This co-main event between Zhang Weili, the champion, and Yan Xiaonan, the number one contender in the strawweight division, is a first of its kind in UFC history. It is the first time that we see two Chinese fighters, two Chinese women competing for a UFC championship. It's only fitting that so many things are similar with these two ladies. Both are 8-2 in the UFC. Both are 34 years old. Both have a 63-inch reach. Both have beaten former UFC champions en route to becoming the highest level, the highest tier of the strawweight division. Now, some may say Zhang Weili is many, many tiers above the rest of the division, but I guess that's what we're here to find out on Saturday. Zhang Weili is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. Have a poster of her and Joanna Jędrzejczyk on my wall. She may just be the most entertaining women's fighter in the UFC. And if you don't put her at number one, you gotta have her in the top 3 at minimum. And I'm loving this narrative here for UFC 300. We talked about the main event and how it didn't take long for both guys to get a championship opportunity. Even other people mentioned in the main event discussion, like Yuri Prohaska, that light heavyweight picture, it didn't take a lot for those fighters to reach the top and to become a champion or get a shot to become champion. Well, let us not forget that it didn't take long for Zhang Weili to become the women's strawweight champion for the first time, that is. She debuted in August of 2018, and just 1 year later, 3 fights later, she was fighting Jessica Andrade for the strawweight championship of the world in China, headlining a card to become the first Chinese champion in UFC history in her home country. And what does Zhang Weili do? She demolishes Jessica Andrade. She runs through Jessica Andrade in 42 seconds. From there, she goes on to defend her belt against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, one of the longest reigning women's champions in UFC history, one of the greatest fighters in UFC history. And what do those two women do? They put on the best women's fight in UFC history and one of the greatest fights in all of UFC history, regardless of male or female. But in April of 2021, it seemed that maybe Zhang Weili had met her match when she went up against Rose Namajunas, former champion, and gets knocked out in the very first round in less than a minute and a half, and then loses the rematch later on that year in November. And what was a very, very closely contested split decision that went all 25 minutes. But since then, Zhang Weili has been on her revenge tour and made it look easy. In her rematch with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, not only does she beat her again, but she knocks her out in the second round with a spinning back fist. She then takes the title from Carla Esparza with ease, submitting her 1 minute and 5 seconds into the second round, and then defends her second reign title for the first time against Amanda Lemos, who to me was probably the second most dangerous woman in this division outside of Zhang Weili. And Zhang Weili put on a historic, quite literally, title defense. It was one of the most one-sided fights you will ever witness. It shattered records for strike differential in a title fight, and she demolished Amanda Lemos for 25 straight minutes. How a finish didn't happen is beyond me. But here we are now, April 13th, 2024, and Yan Xiaonan is looking to become the second Chinese champion ever, and to do so, she has to take out her fellow countrywoman. Wins over Angela Hill, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and Claudia Gadelha got Yan Xiaonan to the highest point in her career, but that is when she faltered at the biggest level because Carla Esparza in May of 2021 had the best performance of her entire life and defeated Yan Xiaonan. Not only defeated her, but knocked her out in the second round, ran through her, controlled her on the ground, and got a nasty ground and pound finish. And from there, it set up a second straight loss for Yan Xiaonan, this time against Marina Rodriguez in March of 2022, a fight that was closely contested, that went 15 minutes, but we saw Rodriguez get the split decision victory. Yan Xiaonan has corrected her path, is back in the win column with 2 straight victories, a decision over Mackenzie Dern, and a knockout in just 2 minutes and 20 seconds over Jessica Andrade last May. So this will be the first fight for Yan Xiaonan in over 11 months, whereas we did see Zhang Weili fight in August, so still a relatively long layoff for the champion, but a longer layoff for the challenger. And I like this fight because Zhang Weili is great on the feet and can knock out anyone, can outpoint you on the feet for 25 minutes if need be, but she's added so many wrinkles to her game and gotten better fight by fight to the point that she can now grapple with the best in the world and not only do it and compete, but beat them there in that aspect of the game. Yan Xiaonan hasn't yet gotten to prove that second wave that Zhang Weili has. She hasn't gotten to prove as much, I should say, on the ground as Zhang Weili, but on the feet, she is dangerous. She is a technical sniper and a very methodical point fighter. When fights go the distance, Yan Xiaonan is nearly unbeatable with a 9-1 record when they go the full amount of time, but she has not had to do it for 25 minutes. Zhang Weili has multiple times and came out on the winning side more than the losing side. I really hope that this fight gets the respect it deserves for the monumental status that it truly holds, something we've never seen in the UFC before. 2 Chinese fighters, specifically 2 Chinese women, not only fighting, but fighting for UFC gold. History is on the line. And last but not least, the third title fight of the evening, and it's only fitting because UFC 300, Justin Gaethje, the number 2 ranked lightweight in the world and the BMF champion, welcomes Max Holloway back to lightweight, the current number 2 featherweight in the world, the former featherweight champion of the world. It's gonna be violent. Has there ever been a fight on paper that has screamed fight of the night more than Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway? Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje combine for 23 post-fight bonuses. Now, I know that question I posed is a little bit more difficult than what it just is off the top of my head here. Yeah, I mean, especially if you just want to look at the guys Justin Gaethje has fought. Charles Oliveira, who has the most bonuses of anyone in UFC history. Dustin Poirier, Eddie Alvarez, just to name a few. But come on, this has got to be near the top of the list. This is violence guaranteed. This is a banger if I have ever seen one. And it's for the BMF title. Now, I know a lot of people don't like this belt. It's just a made up belt. But my goodness, it's fun, right? Justin Gaethje started his UFC career 1-2. He beat Michael Johnson in an incredible fight that nearly went to the third round, just 12 seconds shy before getting the knockout. But then he would lose to Eddie Alvarez. He would lose to Dustin Poirier, both of those by knockout. It looked like, okay, maybe, we bring this guy over from the World Series of Fighting, now known as the PFL. He'll be here for some fun fights, but never quite make it to the top of the division. He proved those doubters and that narrative wrong by rallying off 4 straight victories, 4 straight knockouts after that April 2018 loss to Poirier, and earned a shot at the undisputed title by demolishing Tony Ferguson to become the interim champion and face Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, in hindsight, that was Khabib Nurmagomedov's last fight of his career. He was never going out with a loss, but Gaethje did win the first round on the judges' scorecards before being submitted in round 2. It would only take one victory after that loss over Michael Chandler that went the full 15 minutes to earn a second shot at undisputed gold, this time against Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira, also on UFC 300. But again, Justin Gaethje would lose his second chance at the undisputed title by getting submitted to Charles Oliveira. So did it take one win to get back in the title picture this time around for Justin? No. Did it take 2? Well, kinda, but no. It will take at least 3 victories to get a crack at the undisputed lightweight title this time for Justin Gaethje. He beat Rafael Fiziev over the course of 3 rounds. He knocked out Dustin Poirier with one of the best knockouts of 2023 in the second round of their fight for the BMF title last July. It was a nasty head kick that got the silver belt wrapped around Gaethje's waist. He didn't get the undisputed crack at Islam Makhachev. We have since seen Islam defend a second time against Alexander Volkanovski and knock out Alexander Volkanovski. It looks like he's aiming to fight in June or July of this year, potentially against Dustin Poirier. I think a lot needs to play out here this weekend before we commit fully to Poirier getting that shot. First and foremost here, if Justin Gaethje wins, and honestly, even if Max Holloway wins. This will be Max Holloway's second attempt at 155 pounds in the UFC. The first came back in 2019 in a 5-round, one of the best fights of the year with Dustin Poirier for the interim lightweight title, but Poirier will get the better of Holloway on that night and become the interim champ and go on to have 2 undisputed title shots of his own, much like Justin Gaethje. But that wasn't a career-defining moment for Max because he would just go back down to 145 and defend his belt again, this time against Frankie Edgar in July of that very same year. That would become Max's third successful title defense at 145 pounds, but would set up an inevitable trilogy with Volkanovski, but first a pairing of title fights in which Max would not only lose the title, but then lose the rematch, both via decision. Since the second fight with Volk, he's won 4 of his last 5 fights, and you guessed it, the only loss in that stretch was in the trilogy fight to Alexander Volkanovski. It also came by way of decision, but the wins have been against Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Arnold Allen, and the Korean Zombie most recently in August of last year with a brutal 23-second knockout into the third round. So it seems as though Max has all but earned his crack at the featherweight title, which is now held by Ilia Topuria, who dethroned Volkanovski after his historic title reign at 145 pounds. But instead of going directly for the title, Max Holloway accepted a fight for the BMF belt up 10 pounds at 155, and he's looking to make it 1-1 in the lightweight division. And if he wins here, in my opinion, Max Holloway's a number one contender in two different weight classes. Now, it may not be as easy to just give him the 155-pound title shot if he beats Gaethje, because we do have Oliveira versus Tsarukyan on this card as well that we will be breaking down and discussing later. However, he's definitely on the short list, right? It would be the winner of Oliveira Tsarukyan, Dustin Poirier, and Max Holloway if he wins, and then just interchange that with Gaethje if he wins here. But if you look at what Max has done at 145, been a champion, multiple title defenses, fought at 155 before for the interim belt, tried to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think people tend to forget for the title on like 3 days' notice. The commission wouldn't allow him to cut the weight in that short amount of time, but he's always been about that life. That is why he's getting this chance to fight for this belt, which in my opinion just screams the most entertaining fighter in the organization. So here we're going to get two guys that like to stand and bang for 25 minutes or less. Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, the BMF title on the line, a potential title shot against Islam Makhachev at 155 on the line. And for Max here, if he wins and doesn't get the 155-pound title, well, he is absolutely front and center for the 145-pound title should he decide to move back down. But I want to get your guys' thoughts that on this, I should say. If he beats Gaethje here, should Max make a permanent move to 155? In the videos and pictures that I've seen leading up to this event, he looks jacked. He looks noticeably bigger and more filled out this time around than he was back in 2019. This looks like a potential career pivot to 155, a permanent change, if you will, to the lightweight division. Now, if he loses, maybe he does go back down. But if he wins, I think the question has to be asked, will he just stay at lightweight? And Gaethje, on the other hand, has more than earned the shot at the lightweight title. He beat an up-and-comer in Fiziev, and he knocked out a veteran in Dustin Poirier. So if he just beats Holloway here, that's icing on top of the cake, and I believe is the 100% number one contender next, over Dustin Poirier, and in my opinion, over the winner of Tsarukyan and Oliveira. But time will tell. That is what Saturday night is for. This fight has a lot on the line. Maybe if you look at everything in the picture, or the grand scheme of this fight, may just be the most on the line of all of the fights outside of the two actual championship fights in the main and co-main event, of course. But this fight and the other 10 on the card, this has the most at stake because you can be the BMF champion. You can earn a shot at the 155-pound title. You can earn a shot at the 145-pound title if you're Max Holloway. But if you lose, I think if you're either guy here, there's a lot of questions to be had on the future of their career. So give me your thoughts on all three of these title fights at UFC 300. Who will be the light heavyweight champion at the end of Saturday night? Who will be the women's strawweight champion at the end of Saturday night? And who will be the BMF title holder at the end of Saturday night? UFC 300 is here, and I could not be more excited to share it all with you. My excitement, the storylines that I think build all of these fights and hold them in high regard, and the breakdowns and previews are going to keep coming. We're going to do the second breakdown coming tomorrow and the third breakdown coming on Friday, as I mentioned in the intro. So if you're here for the content, be sure to subscribe to the channel because it's going to keep on rolling. Follow along on social media at the BAJ MMA, and follow along on your favorite audio podcasting platforms. If you like getting everything all at once, every Friday and every Monday are the podcast episodes on Spotify, Apple, and many, many more. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Have a great week, and I'll catch you in the next video. Whoo-wee. What a week it's going to be.